You're listening to the N2K Space Network.
Imagine this. Your primary identity provider goes down, whether it's a cloud outage, network issue, or even a cyber attack. Suddenly, your business grinds to a halt. But what if it didn't have to? Meet Identity Continuity from Strata, the game-changing solution that keeps your business running smoothly no matter what. Whether your cloud IDP crashes or your on-prem system faces a hiccup, Identity Continuity seamlessly shifts authentication to a secondary or even tertiary IDP, automatically and without disruption. Powered by the Mavericks Identity Orchestration Platform, Identity Continuity uses smart health checks to monitor your IDP's availability and instantly activates failover strategies tailored to your needs. When the coast is clear, it's a seamless switch back. No more downtime, no lost revenue, no frustrated customers. Just continuous, secure access to your critical applications every single time. Protect your business from the high costs of IDP outages. With Identity Continuity from Strata, downtime is a thing of the past. Visit strata.io/cyberwire to learn how Strata's Identity Continuity can provide seamless enhanced capabilities to your existing identity fabric and receive a free set of AirPods Pro.
"55 years ago this week, Apollo 12 launched the United States' second manned mission to the moon. Commander Pete Conrad, Command Module Pilot Richard Gordon, and Lunar Module Pilot Alan Bean lifted off from Cape Canaveral on November 14, 1969, with the Saturn V launching Apollo 12 into a dark and rainy sky. And I mentioned that as the launch pad and later the vehicle were hit by lightning during liftoff, causing the spacecraft's electronics to go offline for a period, and this triggered a famous fix of switching the signal conditioning equipment, also known as the SCE, to the auxiliary position. The birth of an Uber meme.
Mm-hmm. Many a space hipster's favorite response to any issue, so happy anniversary Apollo 12. It does remind me, Maria, that I believe NASA is sending a satellite to apologize to the aliens. They're calling it Apollo G.
Ay! That gets a clap. That gets a clap.
Thank
I
you.
like it.
Thank you.
T-minus 20 seconds to LOS speed rest. Go for deploy. Roger roll.
Today is November 15th, 2024. I'm Maria Varmazes.
I'm Alice Carruth, and this is T-minus.
AST SpaceMobile, MDA, and Sidus provide financial updates. Impulse Space taps SpaceX for launches. ABL to step away from commercial space.
And we'll be bringing you the weekly space traffic report by our friends at nasaspaceflight.com in the second half of the show, so stay with us for that.
Happy Friday, everybody, and we are kicking off this end-of-week intel briefing with a roundup of financial reports that came out in the last 24 hours. We're starting off with news from AST SpaceMobile, which launched the first 5 of their Bluebird cellular broadband satellites during the quarter. AST reported a strong balance sheet with cash equivalents, and restricted cash of $518.9 million. The company also used the opportunity to announce a multi-launch campaign from Florida. AST SpaceMobile has selected Blue Origin to deliver multiple next-generation Block 2 Bluebird satellites to low Earth orbit on their New Glenn. AST SpaceMobile's global service aims to initially target key markets such as the United States, Europe, Japan, the U.S. government, and other strategic markets. AST says the Cape Canaveral Florida Space Force Station launch campaign, which is scheduled during 2025 and 2026, will utilize existing launch vehicles and Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket for up to 60 Block 2 satellites to low Earth orbit.
MDA Space has released their financial results from the third quarter of the year with revenues of $282.4 million. That's an improvement of up to 38% year over year. The Canadian Space Mission Partner Company also reported a backlog of $4.6 billion at quarter end, driven by new order bookings, including the $1 billion award for phases C and D of the Canadarm3 program announced in Q2 of this year.
Sidus Space reported their third quarter 2024 financial results. The company reported revenues of $1.9 million, a 90% increase year over year. Sidus also announced the closing of its previously announced underwritten public offering of 5,600,000 shares of its Class A common stock. The stock was sold at a public offering price of $1.25 per share for gross proceeds of $7 million before deducting underwriting discounts and offering expenses.
Impulse Space has signed a contract with SpaceX for 3 Falcon 9 rocket launches that will support the ongoing development and deployment of Impulse's vehicles Helios and Mira. The first of these missions will be the inaugural launch of Helios and is targeted for mid-2026.
ABL has announced the decision to step away from the commercial launch market. ABL's founder and president, Dan Piemont, took to social media to share the announcement and explained the decision to focus the company's efforts on national defense, specifically on missile defense technologies. The decision follows a number of setbacks for ABL, including the loss of their RS-1 vehicle during testing in July of this year.
Sierra Space and the U.S. Department of Energy have unveiled a collaboration on thermal protection for space vehicles. The DOE's Oak Ridge National Lab has worked with Sierra on developing exterior spacecraft tiles that can withstand the high temperatures of re-entering Earth's atmosphere over multiple, frequent missions. Sierra Space and Oak Ridge National Lab have completed the first development phase of the patent-pending thermal protection system. The next phase requires more testing, which includes subjecting the tiles to testing at NASA's Arc Jet Plasma facility, which simulates the conditions of re-entry to Earth from space with heated gas flow.
And we have a few contract announcements to close out today's briefing with, starting with the Southwest Research Institute of San Antonio being awarded a contract by NASA for a NOAA space weather program. Southwest Research Institute will build 3 coronagraphs for the Lagrange 1 series project, which is part of NOAA's Space Weather Next program. The 10-year contract is valued at $60 million.
iSpace US and Volta Space have reached an agreement to collaborate on lunar missions. iSpace and Volta have signed an initial framework for negotiations on a future partnership to develop a commercial offering for Survive the Night capability, integrate Volta's Lightport receiver into iSpace US's future missions, and deliver other Volta payloads to the moon's surface.
And Planet has signed an expansion agreement with their partner Abellio. And Abellio uses the Planet Insights platform and the company's PlanetScope satellite data to enhance their digital agriculture solutions. Through this expansion, Abellio will have access to agricultural data across France, nearly 3 times the amount of Planet data that it previously integrated into its solutions in 2023.
That concludes our Intel briefing for today. Stick around for the NSF Space Traffic Report. And if you're looking for more information on any of the stories we mentioned, then head to the selected reading section of our show notes. There you'll also find links to all the sources for our stories. We've added 2 additional ones to read about. One is a call from NASA for proposals to lease the vibration test facility, and another is a partnership announcement from Forsway and ESA.
Hey T-Minus crew, tune in tomorrow for T-Minus Deep Space, our show for extended interviews, special editions, and deep dives with some of the most influential professionals in the space industry. And tomorrow we have our latest AWS in Orbit episode talking about decision intelligence from space with SatSure. Check it out while you're catching up on your chores, stocking up for the holiday season, or packing up for your trip overseas like Alice's. You don't want to miss it.
Now, a word from our sponsor. The Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute is currently seeking qualified applicants for its innovative Master of Science in Security Informatics degree program. Study alongside world-class interdisciplinary experts and gain unparalleled educational, research, and professional experience in information security and assurance. Interested U.S. citizens should consider the NSF's Scholarship for Service program or the DoD's Cyber Scholarship program. Both scholarships cover tuition, required fees, university-sponsored health insurance, and provide more than $30,000 in an additional annual stipend. Apply for these scholarships to start in the fall semester at cs.jhu.edu/MSSI.
Alicia Siegel from NASA Spaceflight.com brings us the space traffic report.
I'm Alicia Siegel for NSF, and this is your weekly space traffic report for T-minus Space. This week was quite a busy one, and it started off with the Changzheng 2C launching from China. Liftoff took place on November 9th at 3:39 UTC from South Launch Site 2 at the Zhochuan Satellite Launch Center. The rocket was carrying 4 PISAT satellites into sun-synchronous orbit. PISAT satellites are synthetic aperture radar satellites in X-band that fly in a wheel pattern formation around the Earth. In this formation, one of them, which is called the master satellite, is positioned at the center of the wheel, with the other 3, called assistant satellites, flying in formation around it. This type of flight allows the satellites to perform interferometric synthetic aperture radar observations of the ground via their X-band radar systems at millimeter-level precision. Going from China to California, a few hours later, we had the first of 5 Falcon 9 launches this week. Liftoff took place on November 9th at 6:14 UTC from Space Launch Complex 4 East in Vandenberg. For this mission, Falcon 9 was carrying 20 Starlink satellites. 13 of them were direct-to-cell, and the other 7 were Starlink V2 mini satellites. The first stage for this mission, B-1081, was flying for an 11th time, and it successfully landed on SpaceX's drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. A few days later, from China again, we had the launch of a Kinetica 1 rocket, also known as Legion 1, with a set of ride-sharing satellites. Liftoff took place on November 11th at 4:03 UTC from Site 130 at the Zhochuan Satellite Launch Center. This mission, the 5th for the Kinetica 1 rocket, saw 15 different satellites launched into a sun-synchronous orbit, and all but 3 of them were Earth observation satellites. Some of them focused on remote sensing, such as the 2 Jilin 1 satellites flying on the mission, along with the Tianyan 24 satellite and the Oman IRSS-1 OL-1 satellite, which was the first foreign satellite launched by a Chinese commercial space company. Other Earth observation satellites on board included the 2 Shiguang 1 satellites for commercial high-resolution methane source detection and the deployment of 6 Yunyao 1 weather satellites. Along for the ride were also 3 satellites called Shiyan 26A, 26B, and 26C, which had been classed as experimental test satellites. Later that day, we had another Falcon 9, the second of the week, from Florida. Liftoff took place on November 11th at 17:22 UTC from Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. The mission was carrying the KoreaSat 6A satellite into a geosynchronous transfer orbit. KoreaSat 6A is a 3.5-ton satellite manufactured by Thales Alenia Space for KT-SAT, a South Korean communications company. Once at its orbital slot in geostationary orbit, the satellite will deliver broadcast communication services to South Korea, replacing the aging KoreaSat 6 satellite. The first stage for this mission, B-1067, was flying for its 23rd time, and it successfully returned to SpaceX's Landing Zone 1 ground pad at the Cape, making it the first booster to fly and land 23 times. Just a few hours later, we had another Falcon 9 from neighboring Pad 40 at the Cape. Liftoff took place on November 11th at 21:28 UTC, carrying another batch of 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites into low Earth orbit. The first stage for this mission, B-1080, was flying for a 12th time, and it successfully landed on SpaceX's drone ship, A Short Fall of Gravitas. This week, we also had the launch of a Changzheng 4B rocket on November 13th at 22:42 UTC from the Taiyuan Satellite Launch Center in China. The rocket was carrying the Haiyang 401 satellite into a sun-synchronous orbit. This satellite is an oceanography satellite, the first of a new generation of Chinese Earth observation satellites aimed at studying the oceans. This will boost and upgrade the country's capability to monitor ocean salinity and marine ecosystems, as well as perform long-term climate change research. Coming back to the United States, we had another Falcon 9 launch from Vandenberg. Liftoff took place on November 14th at 5:23 UTC, carrying another batch of Starlink satellites, 7 of them being Starlink V2 Mini and 13 being direct-to-cell satellites. The booster for this mission, B-1082, was flying for an 8th time, and it successfully landed on SpaceX's drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. And a few hours later, the 5th and final Falcon 9 launch happened from Florida. The mission started on November 14th at 1321 UTC from Space Launch Complex 40, and it carried another 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites into orbit. The first stage for this mission, B-1076, was flying for an 18th time, and it successfully landed on SpaceX's drone ship, Just Read the Instructions. This mission marked the 17th launch by SpaceX over a period of 31 days, a record for the company thus far. This kind of cadence, if prolonged over an entire year, could allow SpaceX to launch up to 200 times per year. That's a lot. With the 4 Starlink satellites this week, SpaceX has now launched a total of 7,324 satellites, of which 667 have re-entered and 6,014 have entered their operational orbit. And to wrap up the very active week of launches, this morning we had the launch of a Chang'e 7 rocket from China carrying the next Tianzhou cargo resupply spacecraft to the Tiangong space station. The Tianzhou 8 spacecraft is carrying about 7 tons of cargo for the crew of Shenzhou 19, who are currently living and working on board the station. The vehicle also carries cargo for the next crew complement, Shenzhou 20, which should be launching in spring of next year. Going into next week, we'll have a lot more launches, so get ready. The first of these is expected to be a Falcon 9 from Florida carrying the Optus X satellite into geosynchronous transfer orbit. The 118-minute launch window for this mission is set to open on November 17th at 21:29 UTC. After that, there will be another Falcon 9 launch from Vandenberg carrying another batch of Starlink satellites. The 4-hour launch window for this one is set to open on November 18th at 5:47 UTC. And coming back to Florida, another Falcon 9 will launch carrying the next communication satellite for India's space agency, GSAT-20. The roughly 2-hour window is set to open on November 18th at 18:31 UTC. Also next week will be the 6th launch of SpaceX's Starship rocket from Starbase in Texas. If hardware and weather cooperate, this could take place as early as November 18th, with the 30-minute launch window set to open at 2200 UTC. Next week, we might also have the next launch of Rocket Lab's HASTE program, which makes use of Electron rockets in suborbital trajectories to test hypersonic technologies. That launch is expected to take place from Wallops no earlier than midnight UTC on November 20th. After that, we'll have the next launch of a Progress cargo resupply vehicle to the International Space Station. The Progress MS-29 spacecraft is set to lift off from Baikonur on November 21st at 12:22 UTC and should be docking to the orbiting laboratory about 2 days later. And at the end of the week, we'll have another Falcon 9 with even more Starlink satellites launching from Florida. The 4-hour launch window is set to open on November 21st at 15:53 UTC. I'm Alicia Siegel for NSF, and that's your weekly space traffic report. Now back to T-minus Space.
We'll be right back.
Quick question. Do your end users always, and I mean always without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device, because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. And it's now available to companies with Okta and Microsoft Entra, and in beta for Google Workspace customers. Check it out at onepassword.com/cyberwire. That's onepassword.com/cyberwire.
Welcome back. Our final story will come as no surprise for anyone that has followed human spaceflight for some time. NASA has released a report that says, drumroll please, space travel accelerates the symptoms of aging. This is the first study to comprehensively examine biomarkers and pathways associated with spaceflight and terrestrial aging, frailty, and sarcopenia. The report found that human space travel induces genomic instability, mitochondrial dysfunction, and increased inflammation. Sounds fun. Anyone over the age of 40 can definitely relate to this one on terra firma. No comment on that. The report comes out the same week that NASA astronaut Suni Williams has come under fire for her appearance on the ISS, which she attributes to looking her age. And we will say that she looks and is amazing, so let's please stop the rumors of issues.
Yeah, the tabloids jumped on that weight story way too fast for my liking.
Same here. The report concluded that NASA needs a frailty index, that's a phrase, frailty index, to monitor development of frailty-related astronaut health risks during spaceflight. The results provide insights into potential avenues for developing countermeasures to combat frailty-related health risks for both astronauts and aging populations on Earth.
So maybe we'll benefit from this study on how we can avoid accelerating the symptoms of aging without going to space. I'm in for that one. That's it for T-Minus for November the 15th, 2024, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. For additional resources from today's report, check out our show notes at space.n2k.com. We'd love to know what you think of our podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing space industry. If you like the show, please share a rating and review in your podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes and send an email to space@n2k.com.
We're privileged that N2K Cyberwire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector. From the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies, N2K makes it easy for companies to optimize your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your teams while making your teams smarter. Learn how at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Alice Carruth. Our associate producer is Liz Stokes. We are mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Brandon Karp. Simone Petrella is our president. Peter Kilpie is our publisher. And I'm your host, Maria Varmazes. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.